from school excited about something, a drawing, a test score, a thought that felt important to you. You don't remember exactly what it was. You just remember the feeling that it mattered. You held it up, and your parents said, "Later, okay?" Later never came. At first, you waited, because children trust time. They believe later is real. They believe attention will circle back. But dinner happened. The evening passed. The moment slipped away. Eventually, you stopped bringing things home. Not because you stopped caring, but because caring alone started to feel embarrassing. You remember sitting in the back seat while your parents talked in the front. Adult conversations, stress, bills, work, life. You watched the road move forward while no one turned around to look at you. No one asked how your day was. No one asked what you were thinking. So you learned to sit quietly. You learned how to keep yourself occupied. You learned how to exist without interrupting. You remember waiting for the right moment to speak. You didn't want to be rude. You didn't want to be annoying. You waited, and you waited. No one noticed. So you lowered your hand. You swallowed your words. And without anyone ever saying it out loud, you learned something that stayed with you. Being quiet hurts less than being ignored. No one told you to disappear. You just noticed life worked better when you did. That's where it begins. Not with shouting, not with violence, not with chaos, but with silence. There was no single moment where you thought, "My parents don't care about me." It was subtler than that. It was a slow realization that your inner world didn't automatically invite attention, that your thoughts, feelings, and experiences could exist and nothing would happen. And so you adjusted, quietly. What being ignored actually means. When people hear the word ignored, they often imagine something obvious. They imagine neglect as abandonment, cruelty, harsh words, clear mistreatment. But psychological neglect rarely looks like that. More often, it looks like absence without hostility. Being ignored as a child does not mean your parents never fed you, clothed you, or kept you safe. It means something more difficult to point to. It means your inner experiences were not consistently acknowledged. Your emotions were not mirrored. Your curiosity was not followed. Your bids for connection were not reliably met. And that shapes a child far more than most people realize. Abuse is something that happens to a child. Emotional neglect is something that doesn't happen for them. Abuse leaves memories of harm. Neglect leaves blanks. And the brain struggles more with blanks than with pain, because pain, at least, confirms existence. Silence leaves the child asking a quieter, more dangerous question. Did I matter at all? Why absence is so formative. Children are not born knowing who they are. They learn who they are through response. When a child smiles and someone smiles back, the brain learns, "I exist." When a child speaks and someone listens, the brain learns, "My thoughts matter." When a child cries and someone responds, the nervous system learns, "I am safe to feel." But when these responses are inconsistent or missing, the brain does not assume neutrality. It assumes meaning, and the meaning is almost always self-directed. Why children blame themselves. A child cannot think, "My parent is emotionally overwhelmed." A child's brain isn't built for that level of abstraction. Instead, it thinks, "Something about me is wrong. This isn't pessimism, it's survival logic. Because believing you are the problem feels safer than believing the people you depend on are unreliable. If you are the problem, maybe you can fix it by being quieter, easier, smaller. So the brain adapts. How silence becomes a developmental message. When silence happens once, it's confusing. When it happens repeatedly, it becomes instruction. The child learns without language. Don't interrupt. Don't ask too much. Don't expect follow-up. Don't assume interest. Over time, silence stops feeling like absence. It starts to feel like information. And the information sounds like this. My presence does not automatically invite care. That belief doesn't fade with age. It settles into the nervous system and becomes a lens for adulthood. Why parents ignore. This part matters. Most parents who ignore their children do not do so intentionally. They are not cruel. They are not malicious. They are often overwhelmed. Many are living in survival mode, stress and emotional bandwidth. Parents may be working long hours, struggling financially, carrying unresolved trauma, emotionally immature, constantly stressed. When adults are overwhelmed, attention narrows. It focuses on problems, tasks, urgency. Children, especially emotionally expressive ones, require presence, not just provision. And presence is the first thing stress erodes. Many parents were ignored themselves. They grew up without emotional attunement, without curiosity directed at their inner world, without being asked how they felt. So they repeat what feels normal, not out of cruelty, but out of familiarity. Neglect doesn't always get passed down through abuse. Sometimes it's passed down through silence. Why intention doesn't reduce impact? Here's the difficult truth. A child's nervous system does not measure intention. It measures response. It doesn't register. My parent loves me but is exhausted. It registers. I reached out and nothing came back. And that experience is encoded the same way every time. So why the child still internalizes it? Even if the parent loves the child deeply, even if the parent sacrifices everything, if emotional presence is inconsistent, the child still adapts, because love without attunement still feels unpredictable. And unpredictability is threatening to a developing nervous system. The brain of the ignored child. To understand the long-term impact, we have to look inside the brain. Attachment is not about love, it's about reliability. A securely attached child learns, when I reach out, someone comes. An ignored child learns, reaching out is uncertain. That uncertainty keeps the nervous system alert. Over time, the child's nervous system calibrates itself to expect delayed responses, minimal engagement, emotional distance. This creates a baseline state of vigilance, not panic, not fear, just constant readiness for disappointment. Repeated emotional non-response activates the stress system. Cortisol rises, the body stays alert. The child becomes highly observant, sensitive to tone, aware of subtle mood shifts. This isn't personality, it's adaptation. Because expressing emotion doesn't reliably lead to comfort, the child begins to inhibit it. They don't stop feeling, they stop showing. This is how emotional shutdown begins. Why the child stops asking. Eventually, the brain makes a decision, not consciously, protectively. If asking doesn't help, stop asking. This is called adaptive shutdown. It reduces pain in the short term. It limits connection in the long term. But at the time, it is survival. The core psychological wound. The deepest wound of the ignored child isn't sadness, it's invisibility. Internalized invisibility. Over time, the child absorbs a belief. I don't naturally register. It isn't spoken, it's felt. It shows up as self-minimization, hesitation, waiting to be invited, assuming others matter more. This belief follows the child into adulthood. The adult may feel uncomfortable taking up space, apologize unnecessarily, assume they are forgettable, prepare for being overlooked, even in rooms where they belong. Loss of the mirrored self. Children form identity through reflection. When emotions are named and acknowledged, the child learns, "This is me." When that reflection is missing, the child grows unsure. They may ask, "Who am I really? Do my feelings make sense? Am I too much or not enough?" This isn't confusion. It's a missing developmental mirror. Identity diffusion doesn't mean you have no identity. It means your sense of self feels unstable. It depends too much on external feedback. Because internally, no one helped you recognize who you were. The ignored child doesn't grow up broken. They grow up unfinished. And adulthood becomes the place where they try to complete what was never reflected back to them. How this shows up in adulthood. By the time the ignored child becomes an adult, the silence is no longer happening around them. It is happening inside them. They may look functional, capable, independent, but internally they carry an invisible rulebook they never chose. One of the most common rules is this: don't take up too much space, so they minimize themselves. They speak softly, even when they have something important to say. They wait for others to finish, even when others never pause. They hesitate before sharing opinions, needs, or excitement, not because they don't have them, but because their nervous system learned that expression often leads nowhere. Another rule sounds like this: don't inconvenience anyone. So they over-apologize. They apologize for asking questions, for taking time, for having emotions, for existing with needs. Apologies become a way to soften their presence before anyone has the chance to ignore it. Chronic self-doubt often follows. Ignored children grow into adults who question themselves constantly, not because they are incapable, but because no one consistently reflected their inner world back to them. Without reflection, certainty never fully formed. So even when they succeed, a quiet voice inside asks, "Was that real? Did I earn this? Am I allowed to feel proud?" Receiving love can feel especially confusing. When affection arrives, it may feel overwhelming, suspicious, or temporary. The adult may think, enjoy it while it lasts. Don't rely on this. Don't get used to being seen. So even in loving relationships, a part of them stays emotionally braced, and this creates a very specific kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being with people while still feeling unseen, because connection feels fragile when your nervous system learned early that attention fades. Relationship patterns. As adults, ignored children tend to develop one of two main relational strategies, sometimes both, depending on the situation. The first is anxious attachment. This adult becomes highly attuned to others' moods. They people please, they overgive, they anticipate needs before they are spoken. They believe believe connection must be earned, so they stay useful, supportive, available. They may fear that if they stop trying, the attention will disappear. The second is avoidant attachment. This adult learns to rely only on themselves. They downplay needs. They intellectualize emotions. They keep distance without always realizing why. They believe closeness leads to disappointment, so they stay self-sufficient, contained, hard to reach emotionally. On the surface, these two patterns look opposite, but they come from the same wound. Both are attempts to solve the same early problem. How do I stay safe when connection is unreliable? People-pleasing says, if I make myself indispensable, I won't be ignored. Withdrawal says, if I don't need much, I won't be hurt. Different strategies, same origin. This is why love can feel unsafe or temporary, not because the adult doesn't want intimacy, but because intimacy activates old expectations of absence. So even healthy love can trigger fear, not fear of closeness, but fear of losing it. The strengths that came from it. Here is the part that is often misunderstood. Being ignored did not only wound you, it also shaped you. Ignored children often develop extraordinary awareness. They notice tone shifts, micro-expressions, unspoken tension, not because they are overly sensitive, but because sensitivity kept them oriented in uncertain environments. They become deeply empathetic. They listen carefully. They remember details. They make others feel seen because they know what it feels like not to be. They often develop strong emotional intelligence. They understand nuance. They can sit with complexity. They tolerate ambiguity. What looks like maturity was often adaptation. They also develop pattern recognition. They connect dots others miss. They see systems, not just moments, because they learned early to observe rather than participate. Sensitivity, in this context, is not fragility. It is a nervous system trained to detect subtlety, and while it came at a cost, it is also a form of intelligence. Why healing feels so hard. Healing is difficult for ignored children because it requires doing the very things that once felt unsafe. Speaking up can feel dangerous, not because words are threatening, but because the body remembers silence as protection. Needs can feel shameful because needing once led to nothing. Rest can feel undeserved because worth was never mirrored consistently. Visibility can trigger anxiety because being seen feels unfamiliar when invisibility was the baseline. Even self-compassion can feel uncomfortable because kindness toward the self was not modeled early on. So healing is not just emotional work, it is nervous system retraining. It is teaching the body that presence is possible without disappearing. You know what? What happened to you was real, even if it was quiet, even if it was subtle, even if no one meant harm. It was not your fault. Your needs were not excessive. They were developmentally normal. You did not imagine the absence. Your body learned from it. Nothing is wrong with you. The way you adapted made sense. You learned to survive in an environment where attention was inconsistent. That does not mean you were unworthy of it. Healing does not begin with confidence. It begins with safety, with small moments of acknowledgement, naming feelings, celebrating internal experiences, allowing yourself to matter, even quietly. New relational experiences matter. Being with people who respond, who listen, who stay present. Over time, the nervous system updates. Boundaries become essential, not as walls, but as signals. They teach the body, I can exist without disappearing. Self-acknowledgement replaces external permission. You begin to notice yourself, respond to yourself, validate your own inner world. This is how identity stabilizes. If you were the child who learned to disappear, you were not invisible. You were adapting. You were responding intelligently to an environment that lacked consistency. And now, as an adult, you get to choose something different. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. From silence to meaning, from neglect to depth, from invisibility to awareness. The psychology of the ignored child is not a story of weakness. It is a story of survival, sensitivity, and strength. And the fact that you are here, seeking understanding, means the story is no longer about disappearing. It is about being seen, first by yourself. And that is where healing truly begins.